right. It's the That's Enough Out of You podcast. After some technical difficulties with Sean and Bill. How's it going, Sean?
Doing good now, Billy. Doing a lot better now.
We had some technical difficulties getting this show going today, but I think we're
ready, buddy.
Right. We're doing all right now. Just some funny how these computers work. If you don't check a couple of boxes, then the whole thing goes to hell.
This is going to be a special show, pal.
It is. This is going to be a little bit different than what we usually do. It's we don't really have one topic today. We're going to get some. We've been over the months that we've been doing this podcast. We've been getting a lot of good comments and questions from our listeners. So we thought we'd dedicate this podcast to those. And Sean, you got a bunch of them, right?
Yeah, it's been crazy, buddy. We've got so many comments and questions, and some of them are from personal friends of ours that listen to the show, but a lot of them are from people all over the country and all over the world, Billy. I mean, we got questions tonight from Algeria, from Vietnam, from Sweden.
Wow.
I mean, it's really incredible. And some of them are really, I mean, the questions are really smart and our listeners are really intelligent, buddy. So we figured we'd get back to them, buddy. We'll do a whole show dedicated to them. And let's see how it goes.
All right. That's great.
See how many we could get to, bud.
Yeah. All right. Let's get started. I'm dying to hear what we have here in the electronic mailbag.
Well, let's start the first one off with Nate the Great. And he said, are you guys going to be doing an episode on Martin Luther King Jr.? And yes, we are. I've been working on it this week, doing the research on it. I actually been researching that for a long time. You know, in full disclosure, you know, I brought Nate on an episode of Garlic Jar podcast, and we did one on Martin Luther King about a year ago, maybe a year and a half. And if anybody wants to listen to that, they could go back to Garlic Jar. And I'm on there. I must have been a guest on there about a dozen times.
Yeah. Talking
about everything from JFK, RFK, MLK. But I did bring Nate on to talk about that because it's an important one. And we're definitely going to do a show on Martin Luther King because, Bill, it was another, garbage given to us by the government, official story that, doesn't add up.
Right.
And it's just nonsense. And the thing that people don't understand is that in 1999, Martin Luther King's family sued the United States government in a civil trial for conspiracy to kill MLK, and they won, Bill. And the sad thing about it is, there was one local reporter and one author in the courtroom, and there was no one else except, court personnel.
Yeah.
And that's a disgrace. When you rewind to O.J. Simpson a few years before that, I mean, they were covering that 24/7.
They still cover O.J. Simpson. Every time he steps on the golf course, it's so ridiculous, the things that get the media attention and the things.
Yeah, but Bill, you got to admit, this had to come from the top. I mean, somebody gave an order to all major networks to not cover this trial.
It's just
because, I mean, you're telling me that nobody had an interest in this? ABC, CBS, NBC, nobody covers it? New York Times, Washington Post? Nobody?
It's mind-boggling. Absolutely.
It goes to show you how much control the federal agencies have on the media.
Right.
It really does. Yeah. And that's points it right out. So, yeah, Nate the Great, we're definitely going to do a show on that, buddy. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah. All right.
So question number 2, Billy, and this is a good one. This is from Franco Giordano from Rome, Italy, Billy. And he's a common listener. He sends a lot of comments in and stuff. And here's the question. Guys, love the podcast, but disagree with you on Hoffa. All the media says the Irishman was lying and that Buffalino was just a small-time gangster. Even podcasts like Sammy the Bull Gravano says that. Well, the thing is, the media still says that Oswald killed Kennedy. I mean, I don't take anything the media says, but as far as, thanks for the question there, Franco, because, he's got good comments all the time, but I see where he's coming from. But the thing is, when he mentioned Sammy Gravano, Bill, he might as well mention Michael Francis, because he mentioned on his podcast too that the Irishman didn't do it, and the both of them, I think, mentioned that Buffalino was a small time gangster. He wasn't a big time powerful gangster, like I said he was on the last podcast that we did.
Right.
But the thing is, you got to look at their perspective, Bill. Gravano and Francis, I think both of them were made in like 1976, right? Somewhere around there. And they really didn't come into power until like 1980, 79 is when they really started, getting involved in more prevalent matters within the Cosa Nostra family. So their perspective of Russell Buffalino is really from the 80s when he really had lost a lot of his power. I mean, after Jimmy Hoffa was killed, he lost his power there because he was the go-to guy on Hoffa, but also his health was not good. He went to jail for trying to kill this fellow Napoli. He also, a lot of the powerful bosses that he was very close with, like Tony Salerno, went to prison. Castellano gets whacked. Trafficante dies. Marcello goes to jail. So a lot of the powerful dons across the country that, Buffalino was so close to, they didn't have that power. A lot of them were gone. They were either in jail or dead. So, from Gravano and Francis's perspective, in their time, Buffalino had lost a lot of power and he wasn't this big time boss. But again, Bill, like when they comment on stuff like Hoffa disappearance and the Kennedy assassination and the rigging of the election, you got to remember those things are before their time. So I take more of what they say in their time in the 80s. People are going to take their own opinion on if the Irishman did it. And, maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't. But again, you have to answer those questions we talked about, Billy. Give me an answer. How do you get Jimmy Hoffa from the restaurant to the kill zone?
Yeah.
And who was protecting him from 71 to 75?
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I want to put in there, Billy, is one thing I seen the national media jumps on is that house that Sheeran said that Hoffa was supposedly killed in. They tested that house and they found blood. And it's been reported, and I heard this by multiple outlets in the media, say that the blood did not match Jimmy Hoffa. And that's not true, Bill. The blood was too degraded where they couldn't get a match to anybody, including Hoffa. So they didn't rule Hoffa out.
Right.
They just could not match it to anybody. So there was blood found in that house. They just don't know whose it is.
Yeah.
But again, the media runs with it and they said, well, it wasn't Jimmy Hoffa's. Well, that's not true. They don't know that.
Right.
So I don't know if we'll ever find the answer on that one, buddy.
Well, unless Michael Francis reveals his source.
Well, like I said, that might change my mind. And, Bill, he just released an episode where he talked about Hoffa, but all he basically talked about is all the conspiracy theories that were discredited regarding Hoffa.
Right. He named all of the locations that they debunked where they said that he had been buried.
The Meadowlands and
right. A couple places in Michigan, somewhere in California, I think, Florida, New Jersey.
But if we listen to the Sheeran story, we're never going to find a body because it was taken to a funeral parlor and it's ashes.
Right, yeah. Which most likely is the case.
That's what I think, Bill. I mean, the evidence, you got to go by the evidence. And again, I understand the people out there that are saying, well, Sheeran lied about this, he lied about that. So you don't want to believe anything he says. I get it. But, all these guys, they tell, like I said before, they tell one truth hidden between two lies. You just have to search through everything and come to a conclusion on your own.
Right.
So anything to add to that, Bill, before I go on to the next one?
Oh, these are good questions, though, so far. Really good. So
the next one is from Da Nang, Vietnam. And she doesn't want me to release her name, which is fine. I will respect that. But just talking to her, Bill, I could tell you I get just an interesting perspective on Vietnam and how, her parents or grandparents view the war. And, they don't really have any negative feelings towards the United States. But it's just an interesting perspective to get at what Vietnam is like today. It really would surprise a lot of people, but anyway, her question is, Sean, I also, like you, admire JFK very much. He made so many great decisions, and he wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve which was unacceptable to all the elitist cakes. I know you think Dulles was the mastermind of the assassination, but do you think David Rockefeller actually gave the order? Now that's a great question, Bill. First part is I don't know if JFK was actually planning on abolishing the Federal Reserve. I think he was definitely taking power away from the Fed and giving it to the controller of the currency. I don't know if he was getting rid of it altogether, but that was definitely something that did, as she said, affect the elitist cakes, as she calls them. And David Rockefeller was one of them. Now, did David Rockefeller give the order? I don't know, Bill. I could tell you this, though. No single person profited more from that assassination than David Rockefeller.
Really?
I mean, just what he made in Vietnam, Bill.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is every single policy of JFK's, every single foreign policy, domestic policy, I don't care what, every policy, Bill, is directly against everything that Rockefeller and Dulles wanted to do. Everyone. I can't think of one policy of JFK's that is in line with Dulles and Rockefeller's policies. But did he give the order? I don't know. But it's interesting because Lisa Peace asked me what my opinion is on who actually controls who. Does the intelligence agencies control the 1%, or does the 1% control the intelligence agencies and they work for the 1%? And what I said to her is, my opinion is, I think it's a mutual interest. I think they work hand in hand, but I don't think Allen Dulles took orders from anybody. If Allen Dulles wanted to do something, he was going to do it. He didn't take orders from presidents. Right. He didn't listen to Kennedy. He didn't listen to Eisenhower. He didn't listen to Johnson. I mean, when I think of Allen Dulles, I think of that line in X-Files, Bill. Remember that episode when the smoking man, when Mulder pulled a gun on him, and he says, the smoking man says to him, he says, "You think I'm afraid of you?" He says, "I watched presidents die." Yeah. I mean, that's what I think of Allen Dulles. Like, I don't think he took orders from anybody, but I think his interests were aligned with Rockefeller's. So I look at it like a pyramid, Bill, like with and it's not even the 1%, it's the 0.0001% on top of the pyramid, like Rockefeller and them. Right. And then Dulles and them guys are like in the middle, and they're inside the pyramid where they do a lot of the work and stuff. But I mean, I think it goes hand in hand. And I think most of us, 99% of us are below the pyramid looking up, and we can't see what's going on there at the top. Right. I don't know if you got a feeling on that.
No, I totally agree. I mean, there are things that go on that we couldn't even conceive of.
Exactly.
Hey, Sean, let me ask you something, because this is something that Jim DiGenio mentioned when we had him on a few weeks ago. He talked about, and I know you've mentioned this name before, but I think I know who it is, but I just want to, maybe you could confirm. He was talking about somebody named Foster Dulles.
Oh, that's Allen Dulles' brother. Okay, John Foster Dulles. Okay, so he was Eisenhower's Secretary of State. Okay, he was very powerful. Him and Allen were both managing partners of Sullivan and Cromwell law firm. Right. And they were very powerful. I believe John Foster was married into the Rockefeller family. Don't confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. But they were very close. But Foster died in, I want to say he died in 1959. He died before Kennedy, I believe. Okay. But he was very powerful, Bill. And he had a lot. We mentioned him, Bill. I mentioned him on the Vietnam episode. He had a lot to say in what was going on when the French were there. Yeah. He was the one that wanted to give the bomb to the French. Okay, that's right. That was John Foster Dulles. Okay. So that was Allen's brother. But I talk a lot more about Allen, but John Foster Dulles was very powerful as well. Yeah. Okay. But he did die, a decade before Allen. Yeah. And one thing I want to say, Bill, as far as Rockefeller and Dulles, the one thing I will say, like, if and this is kind of going sideways a little bit, but if Rockefeller ever wanted to take out Dulles for whatever reason, it would be difficult for him. But if Allen Dulles wanted Rockefeller gone, he could make a phone call and it happened the next day. You know what I mean? Like, to me, Allen Dulles is the most powerful. He was the most powerful man in maybe the world, Bill. He could start a war with a phone call, Bill. Right. Well, I mean, when you are
when you control the CIA, which I mean, essentially just operates as an independent agency. It has
Right.
there's no oversight.
And even after he got fired, Bill,
Right.
even after Kennedy fired him, he was still in control.
Yeah.
And if he wanted a world leader gone, he'd be eating his breakfast. And if he decided, I want this world leader gone, he would make a call and it'd be in motion and the wheels would be turning and the leader would be overthrown.
And I think
you see it everywhere.
I think that continues to this day. I mean, I
agree.
There was a podcast that I was listening to, and there was a woman on, I can't remember her name, but she's written books about the CIA, and she has a contact in the CIA. And she mentioned something about the Osama bin Laden murder, assassination or whatever you call it, because it was in Pakistan, which is a sovereign nation.
Right.
It could not have been a military.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Bill. It was a covert op, though. It was probably
It had to It had to be a CIA operation that used the military, used the
SEAL Team 6,
right? The Navy SEALs in order to,
and they do that all the time, Bill. Yeah. CIA operations, they always use the military.
So because
special forces.
We can't just send our military into a country to kill somebody.
No, but the thing is, Bill, the CIA is supposed to have no power domestically. They're chartered. They're supposed to be internationally.
Right.
But yet you see what they do in the United States. I mean, Operation Chaos operated throughout the entire United States.
Yeah.
And they got stations all over the country here.
Right. Because again, there's no oversight. There's nobody who can rein them in. And I think that's what got Kennedy killed. That he wanted to rein in that power.
Well, he said he was going to split them in a million pieces or something and cast the pieces to the wind.
And look what happened to him.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So that was a great question, Bill. And again, great chats on that to get into just the perspective of Vietnam and how different the country really is from how we perceive it to be,
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so the next one, Billy, is from my brother, Jamie Kane, who we've been trying to get on the show forever.
Well, he's harder to get on than...
We'd probably get a debate between Biden and Trump before we get my brother on here, but you know what I mean? It's like, it's unbelievable. But anyway,
he's a loyal listener, but we just can't get him on.
Yeah, he listens, but we can't get him on. But so his question is, Sean and Bill, great podcast. Are you guys going to be doing a show on DB Cooper? And what's your thoughts on his real identity? Are you familiar with DB Cooper's story, Bill?
No. I think you may have told me this a long time ago, Sean.
Yeah, I've been into this
for a
long time, Billy.
Yeah.
So this is DB Cooper, 1971, I believe. This guy boards a plane from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. And he never gave the name DB Cooper. He gave the name Dan Cooper. But one reporter put it down as DB Cooper, passed it on to somebody else, and then it became legend. But he never gave the name DB Cooper. He gave the name Dan Cooper. And he boards the plane. And when they take off, he tells one of the stewardess there that he has a bomb. He shows her the bomb in a briefcase. And he demands $200,000, which today would be the equivalent of like 1.3 million or something like that. And then he asked for 4 parachutes. And during the flight, he gets the money. And during the flight, he orders everybody to the front of the plane. And they released a lot of the passengers, Bill, when they stopped. So it was just the crew that was on there at the end.
Yeah.
And he ended up telling them to get to the front of the plane. And then during the flight, he jumps out of the plane, Bill. And can you imagine this? The guy's in a suit.
Wait a second. How did they release passengers?
Well, what happened, Bill, is when they stopped, they made a stop. I think they said something. They had to fuel up or something. I forget. And they got everybody off the plane, and he stayed on. And then the passengers didn't know what was happening until later. They didn't know what was going on. The only one that really seen this guy was the stewardess that was dealing with him, that really got a good look at him. Uh-huh. And they stayed on a plane and they took off. Okay. And then when they take off, he told the stewardess to get up to the front with the pilot and the other pilots. And he jumps off the plane, Bill. Can you imagine opening the doors there and looking out in the middle of nowhere, just seeing nothing and jumping out that plane? And they never found him. They did find some of the money that washed up on shore, and it's been a mystery forever, Bill. Did he die? Did he survive? And I remember the first time I heard the story about DB Cooper. I was just a kid, and I remember my dad and I think it was my Uncle Frank and my Uncle Jack were watching a show on TV, a documentary, and the guy in there said that nobody could survive that jump. And I remember my dad and my uncles, they said, we served with a dozen guys in the military that could have made that jump, but it's specialized training. You would have to have specialized training. So I've been following this story for a long time, Bill. There's a theory that I subscribe to of who it is. So to answer Jamie's second part of the question, I think we should wait till we do an episode on that. Don't you think, Billy?
Yeah, because I have a lot of questions. Let's do an episode on that, Sean, because I'm thinking what? First of all,
it's a crazy story, Bill. Just think of the guy's in a suit, Bill. He's in dress shoes and he's climbing down the stairs of a plane and jumps into the abyss, Bill. And it's freezing. It's in a rainstorm. And he parachutes out and they never found him, but they found money that washed up on shore. And then, there's a really good theory. There's everybody, it's just like anything with JFK and Hoffa and everybody. There's so many people that say they're DB Cooper.
Right.
And it's just, you have to get through all the nonsense. But I think there's a really good suspect. And I'll talk about that when we do an episode.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. So let's get on to the next question is from Marlon L. Pierio. I think I'm pronouncing that right. From Stockholm County, Sweden, Bill.
Wow.
She's a loyal listener to the show. She comments a lot.
Yeah.
She said, would love to see an episode on all the suspicious deaths in the JFK assassination. And which one do you feel are the most suspicious? Wow, that's a great question, Billy. Mm. I mean, we should do an episode on that.
Yeah. We should probably bring either Jim or Lisa on to talk about that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
They would have great insight on that. But to answer the question, I mean, George de Mohrenschildt is really suspicious. David Farry's death is very suspicious. Dorothy Kilgallen. Are you familiar with Dorothy Kilgallen, Bill?
No.
Well, she was a radio, TV reporter. She had her own TV show back in the 50s.
Yes, I did hear about this. Yes.
Okay. Well, she got an interview with Jack Ruby.
Okay. Yeah.
And she interviewed Jack Ruby, and then she came back for that interview, and she said, I'm going to blow the doors open on the Kennedy assassination. And then she went back to her apartment in New York, and she ended up dead.
Yeah.
They said it was a drug overdose. Yeah. So you want to talk about suspicious? Yeah, that's pretty suspicious. Yeah. Lee Bowers is another one. He was the guy in the rail yard, Bill, behind the grassy knoll.
Right.
That said he thought he saw gunmen over there. Right. He thought he saw smoke coming from that area. He died suspiciously. Rose Jeremy was another suspicious death. You familiar with that one, Bill? She was in the movie JFK. She was the prostitute at the beginning.
That's right. Yep. I do remember that one.
So that's a suspicious death. But I mean, there's so many, Bill, and they're not all connected, but you can't tell me that some of these aren't connected. I mean,
it's too many to be coincidence.
Too many.
Yeah.
Too many. And the thing is, Gaetan Fonzi, the great investigator for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, he was so many of the people that he was investigating and talking to and interviewing, they would end up committing suicide, where he almost felt like the angel of death. Every time he would give his card to somebody, they'd end up committing suicide, like de Mohrenschildt.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, we'll definitely do a show on that. I mean, that's a great topic, because there's so many suspicious deaths. I don't know if you could think of any, Bill, that you think are more suspicious than the ones I mentioned.
No, but yeah, it'd be like I said. I think if we could get Jim back on, there's a number of topics I'd like to talk to him about, and I'm sure that's one he'd enjoy talking about.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I also want to get more with him on Jack Ruby.
Right.
That conversation we had about Ruby was really interesting.
Yeah. And then also the autopsy, which I think
Yeah, we got to get to that.
yeah. So let's try to book him. Let's get him back on because that's
Okay.
be really exciting to touch on.
We'll work on that. So let's move on, Bill, because we got so many of these questions here, buddy.
Yeah, we may not get to all of them, Sean, because
We may not.
we may have to cut short pretty soon. But let's get as many as we can.
All right. So the next one is from Scott Alfieri, and I hope I'm not butchering that name, Scott, but he's from Concord, Mass, and he's a loyal listener, Bill. He comments on almost every show.
Yeah.
And he always has great comments and questions. But before I even get this question, he commented today. He asked me about when he was listening to the episode we did on Giancana, and he wanted to know if I knew that Tony Accardo, the mob boss from Chicago, who was actually the boss, not Giancana, if I knew that the Bosa brothers, the football players, if I knew that they were his great grandchildren. And I did know that, Bill.
Really?
I didn't mention that on this episode, but I did mention it on the Garlic Jar podcast when I did that.
Oh, I didn't.
But just an interesting piece of trivia, Bill.
Yeah.
The Bosa brothers that play for Ohio State and they're in the NFL now.
Right.
Yeah, that's his great grandsons.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So here's this question. It's actually a comment, but Bill and Sean, thank you for all the time you put into the podcast. The show is very well researched and offers opportunity to listeners to embark their own journey to find as close to the truth as possible for themselves. Loved all the Watergate stuff, the JFK, RFK stuff, and the sports topics that you present. Keep it up. So that's just a great comment from Scott.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. And I know Scott, I see him now on social media all the time. I think we're Facebook friends and Twitter and whatever else. So thank you. That's really nice. Appreciate that.
Yeah, he's always got great feedback, Bill.
Yeah.
And the next one is from our buddy Angelo Mariucci. And this one, Bill, he's got 3 questions in one here. So let me just read the whole thing and then we'll take it one by one. So he said, when are you guys going to do more pro wrestling? Like on Montreal Screwjob?
Oh,
There
yeah.
are lots of theories about that to discuss on Monday Night Wars. Also, the mob would love to see one on the real life Goodfellas story, which is stranger than the movie. Also, the documents being withheld in the JFK assassination, do you think they'd ever actually be released? So the first part on the wrestling, Bill, you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, I definitely want to do one on. I'd love to do one on the whole that era because I was just thinking about this. It's funny funny you brought this up because I was just thinking about this the other day about how Bret Hart kind of he blames everybody for the end of his career except himself. I mean, he blames McMahon for the Montreal Screwjob. He blames Bischoff for having no idea what to do with him in WCW. He blames Goldberg for working too stiff, as they say, and he kicked him too hard. So I'd love to do one, about that, that whole story, because there was that documentary that they were filming while that went on. So that's a great one. I'd love to do that.
I also like to do one, Bill, on Dino Bravo, the wrestler, too, that ended up getting involved with the mafia in Canada.
Yeah.
And ended up getting whacked.
Yeah. Yeah, what a crazy story that is.
Yeah. So I was working on that story, and then I got sidetracked on some others, but down the road, I would like to do that. So, yeah, we'll do some more wrestling.
Definitely.
The second part of that question, Bill, about the Goodfellas. We got to do an episode. We got to do, we got to do one on the movie, and then we could do one on the real life, because I think the movie, it gives you the perspective from Henry Hill.
Yeah.
And Henry Hill in real life, he was really a punk, Bill. Right. And he got his respect because for whatever reason, Jimmy Burke liked him and protected him, and nobody wanted to mess with Jimmy Burke. So He's kind of like that little guy who we all know that'll start a fight and then he gets his 5 big buddies. Well, he had one big buddy, and that was Jimmy Burke.
Yeah.
And I think the movie too kind of downplays a little bit Jimmy Burke and Polivario, Paul Sabino's character.
Mm-hmm.
Like those two guys were vicious, Bill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we could do a whole show on the Lufthansa heist because Burke and Vario end up whacking everybody.
Right. Yeah, it's been so long since I read the book. I'll have to read the book again, the Nick Pileggi book, Wise Guy, which is what the movie was based on. And that's a good story in and of itself. I don't know if you've ever seen an interview with Pileggi talking about that, but he says how he got a phone call from Scorsese, and he says he's Mr. Pileggi, this is Martin Scorsese. He said, "Oh yeah, I know who you are." But yeah,
I mean, we'll definitely do it because, like I said, Jimmy Burke. I mean, we definitely gotta do one on all of that. You know, we could do a whole show just on the Lufthansa heist.
Lufthansa,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
And then anything before we move to the last part of Andrew's question, Billy?
I don't even remember what the last one was, Sean. You're gonna have to.
Well, the last one was about the documents in the JFK assassination.
Oh, right.
So I was working on them, and we were going to put an episode together, but I stopped doing it, Bill, because you know what? The government once again screwed the people over, and the documents that they released, and this is going to disappoint a lot of people, but they're garbage, Bill.
Yeah.
A lot of them are duplicates that they already released. Some of them are so redacted you can't even make anything out of it. They're actually breaking the law because the law that was put in by the ARB, there's supposed to be no redactions. So the new documents I found are pretty useless, Bill. So I don't think we're going to be able to do a show on it. There's nothing in the new releases that I've seen so far. And the other thing is, as far as do I think the government's going to release the ones that they still have classified? No, I don't. I think they're going to play games, and if they do release them, it's going to be like this batch, you know, that you can't make anything out of them.
But Sean, what would be the harm now in releasing everything? Because there's nobody left. There's nobody around that could be charged with anything. I mean, anybody that was involved with it is gone.
Probably, yes, probably are. But I think that, you know, because there's something there, Bill. Like I said, I don't think there's anything that Dulles would ever put on paper, but I think there's something there that's so damning to the CIA, Bill. And I think Lisa Pease mentioned this on one of our shows that, you know, if it comes out that the CIA killed the president, I mean, everything falls apart, Bill.
Yeah.
You know, everything you learned is a lie. And all these people and all these media and people that were protecting the government all these years saying that Oswald did it and everything, if you find out that's a lie, it's like the first domino to fall, Bill.
But we all know it, though. We all know it.
We do know it, Bill, but they're not saying it. Think about this, Bill. The U.S. government will admit that their UFOs are a thing. That's what they're admitting right now.
Right.
And they still won't admit that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy, but they'll admit on UFOs.
Well, here's the difference, though. I mean, UFOs, as we're finding out, this is like an ongoing thing. People have their own cameras, and we're able to capture these, you know, these unexplained objects zooming around the sky. I mean, that's something we're able to
but Bill, they've been saying that there were nothing. That's been going on since the 40s, Bill.
Yeah.
People were seeing UFOs, and they've been saying that there's nothing, it's nothing, and now all of a sudden they say we can't explain it.
Right. Well, I mean, there's no way to hide it anymore. You know, but nobody has.
Well, like you said though, Bill, they're not hiding anything. Everybody, I think if you poll the people, 85% of the people probably think that Kennedy was killed by a conspiracy. So,
right. So what's
what are they doing? Like but I think if they admit it, if it comes from the government,
right,
that their own government killed Kennedy. And they killed Robert Kennedy, and they killed Martin Luther King, who they honor with a holiday. Everything falls apart, Bill.
Yeah, well, you're probably right.
You know, so I think that's the reason they don't.
You're probably right.
All right, so the next one, Billy. This one is from Algiers, Algeria, Bill.
Okay.
And I hope I'm not butchering his name, Bill. Farid Mansouri. I don't know.
All right.
Sorry if I butchered that name, but he said, Sean and Bill, great show. My favorite episodes are the ones with Lisa Peace on. Well, that's our favorites too. It's great when Lisa's on.
Yeah, we love it.
Do you feel JFK's policies in Indonesia and the Congo were the main reason that he was killed? Well, I think they're part of it. Definitely. But I don't think there's one main reason. I think, changing Vietnam War policy, I think that was one. The speech, the peace speech that he made at American University regarding the Soviet Union, his domestic policies,
it's everything that we've been talking about. It's everything we've been talking about. He challenged the system. He challenged basically the intelligence, the heart of the intelligence, system in Washington. And
but Bill, I do feel that Indonesia and the Congo are very important, because when you think about it, take the Congo, the three people that wanted freedom for the Congo, JFK, Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary General of the UN, and Patrice Lumumba, were all assassinated. Right. In Indonesia, three people that were trying to get freedom for the people in the West Irian section, where all the rich gold was and the oil and the minerals, JFK, Dag Hammarskjöld were both assassinated, and then you had Ahmed Sukarno, who was eventually overthrown, and it was taken over by Suharto. So, you had the three people that was trying to get peace in both of those situations. They were all taken out in various ways. So, I think those two places are very important, but you can't pin them down as the most important.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to find out this was the reason or that was the reason. It was probably just all of these things put together. The fact that he was such a popular and loved president that there was almost no way he wasn't going to get reelected, and then Bobby would have been elected. It would have continued. I think it was just, they just did not want him to be president, and that was,
And I think once he fired Dulles too, Bill, I think the wheels were turning once Dulles got fired. We're somewhere down the line, I'm going to get him back, is what Dulles was thinking.
Yep.
So let's do one more, Billy.
All right.
Let me see. All right. So we got one here from New Zealand, Bill, Mr. Duncan in New Zealand.
Okay.
And he says, Sean, what do you make of the Madeline Brown story about the party at the oil man H.L. Hunt's house? Well, the story, it wasn't H.L. Hunt. It was the Murchisons, the oil men from Dallas. They were actually the ones that founded the Dallas Cowboys. It was supposedly this party. I don't know if you're familiar with the story,
No,
Bill.
I'm not.
Well, there's supposedly a party, I think the day before Kennedy was assassinated, and Madeline Brown was supposedly a mistress of Lyndon Johnson, and she has all these people at this party. Like it kept adding on over the years. Who was there? Nixon was there. Every Jagger, Hoover was there, and all these people that they weren't in Dallas at the time. Half these people. So I don't take a lot of belief in that story at all. I don't think there's anything to it. As a matter of fact, as far as the oil men, Bill, I always, years ago, I thought H.L. Hunt was a strong suspect, but the more I think about it, H.L. Hunt and the Murchisons are kind of like the mob is used, just like a spook story that the intelligence agents like to blame.
Yeah.
Every now and then they'll throw that out, that these guys might have been involved. But it also might be, and I'd like to ask Jim and Lisa this question. I think a lot of it might be to protect the one oil man that you don't hear a lot about that I think is a strong suspect, and that's D.H. Byrd. D.H. Byrd was very close to Allen Dulles. He owned the Texas School Book Depository. He started the Civil Air Patrol Unit, where David Ferry first met Lee Harvey Oswald. He was given an award for that by Curtis LeMay, the general from the Air Force who hated Kennedy. He had ties to military intelligence. And after Kennedy was killed, Bill, he took the window where Oswald supposedly shot out, and he put it like in his house, in his mansion, and set up like a shrine.
Oh, gee.
So yeah, so
That's demented.
demented.
Yeah.
Yeah. But D.H. Bird, I mean, he would be the one guy that I would single in. I would like to hear Jim and Lisa's take on that. And I always felt that, all the H.L. Hunt stuff and everything was maybe a deflection to keep away from Bird, because he was close to Dulles and he may have been involved, and he knew Ruth Payne too, Bill. So that's another thing. And we talked about Ruth Payne and her connection to Oswald.
Yep.
So he's a very suspicious character. But the other stuff on the oilman, that whole story about the party, that's nonsense. I don't think that party ever happened. And don't get that party confused with the one that I talked about where they were talking about Alan Dulles, and that was in California. That's a totally different story. And don't be confused with this party, because the one in Dallas, I think, is complete nonsense.
Yeah.
So we still got a lot of questions here, buddy.
All right. Well, we'll do another episode. That's it's great that we have all of this listener questions and listener feedback and comments. I'm just makes me feel like we're actually doing something, Sean. We're making a difference out there. Somebody's listening.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we apologize to the people that we couldn't get to, but we'll get to the questions eventually.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of good ones left, Billy.
All right. Well, we'll do another feedback episode for sure. Well, this was good.
All right, buddy.
A lot of great questions, a lot of great feedback. It's always great to hear from our listeners, our loyal listeners, and hopefully that's growing by the day. We've got just looking at our YouTube views and our podcast listens, and it's a lot more than I thought we were going to have, Sean, when we started this thing. So yeah, we're just getting started. I mean, we really are just getting started. This is like we're still in the infancy of this podcast. We're still learning how to do these things. I'm learning on the technical end, and as I mentioned when we opened the show, I had a bunch of technical difficulties starting today, but we'll get there, and we'll keep growing, and hopefully our listeners will keep listening.
And one thing, Bill, is I get a lot of comments. People, after an episode, they reach out to me, and if I don't get back to somebody right away, just hold on, I'll get back to you. But a lot of conversations back and forth between people, Bill, that just they always come up with great stuff and ask great questions. And a lot of times they'll say stuff that I left out of the episode, Bill, because you can only get to so much in an episode. And I love when people point that out, like, oh, you should have talked about this. Well, yeah, that's a good point. There's a lot of stuff that should have been mentioned, and sometimes you just forget, or you're just too pressed for time, Bill.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right. Great episode, Sean. Well, thank you guys. Thanks to our listeners for supplying us with this great feedback, and we'll talk to you next time. And that's enough out of you.
That's enough out of you.